My name is Anthony Martin. I'm a senior field services program manager covering Southeast Iowa with the Iowa Soybean Association's RCFI. And today just wanted to go over soybean seeding rate and potential for variable rate seeding. This is a topic that we've been working in for several years, ongoing. Just wanted to kind of give an update on where we are and what we've found over the years. So the first question that kind of need to address is what is the need for this research? One of the big things is helping soybean farmers understand optimum seeding rates. How changes in those seeding rates can affect profitability. If we're decreasing our rates, what are seed savings costs, and ultimately, what is that impact on yield and bottom line? Potential for variable rate seeding in soybean, and then identifying those features which would present opportunities for the variable rate seeding. Those best features that we can use to develop those prescriptions. So over the years, from 2009 to 2020, we've had 124 trials. We had 4 last year, and all of these trials, for the most part, they're going to be set up like you see there on the left-hand side. So 3 rates. In that example, that's 100, 130, and 160,000. Last year in the 4 trials, the range was between 80 and 180. Again, kind of varied by field and what the farmer was wanting to look at. But we did see lower rates, 80 and 90,000 at all of those 4 locations. And then there at the bottom side of the screen, that's the locations for all of the trials that we've had over the span of those 11 years. So for the most part, each of those trials is going to be a little different in how it was laid out, as I mentioned. It's also going to vary a little bit on the results. Each one is going to have, slightly different yield for the different populations, depending on kind of the features, the variability in the field. So I'm just going to show one here, located here in central Iowa. As we can see there, the yield average by individual treatment. For the most part, we see a pretty consistent, trend of the 150,000 having the highest yield, and then 90,000 having the lowest yield. Statistically, the 90 and 120,000 were about the same, but the 150,000 did come out on top, about 6 bushel better. If we go then to the bottom matrix there, we can kind of look at the different soil types that were in this field. This is a rolling field, a lot of variability in it. What we can start to see is, these places where we have these steeper slopes that are eroded, we can start to see that 150,000 is really showing up as the high yielder. When we get into that Tama silty clay loam, a little more flat, less slope on that. Things kind of even out a little bit. 120,000 ultimately has the highest yield, but it's all basically within 1 bushel. So what that would tell us is within that area, we could potentially go down to that 90,000. Reduce our seeding rate, but still kind of maintain that yield that we were getting from the higher populations. So that's one thing that we look for as we're going through these trials, seeing if there's any sort of trends that are popping out. But ultimately, from those 11 years of trials that we have conducted, One thing that we've really kind of latched onto is the seeding rate response by land classification. So the graph there at the top, this is showing low spot, foot slope, side slope, and then shoulder. So basically, as you're going up up a hill, and you can kind of get an idea of what that kind of looks like there at the bottom. So like in the middle image, the brown would be our low spot. Foot slope is that bright green, you know, kind of as we go up that hill. So in that graph, you know, our low spot, we're really not seeing any yield differences between the three populations. So what that would mean to us is we can drop to that 130,000 without sacrificing yield. Then as we start to go up, you know, we get into the foot slope, side slope. You know, the foot slope, that 170,000 is popping up, but ultimately, you know, with other trials that we've conducted, the 150,000 would still serve well in that area. Side slope, same way. The 150,000 is still kind of where we would want to be. But then as we get to the top of that hill, you know, the shoulder, and then kind of level off, the 170,000 is going to be where we want to be. So you can kind of get an idea of that there in the third image at the bottom of what a prescription could look like for this field. This is just an example, but just to show what we could potentially do with that information. So one area that we saw there was land classification. The other promising classification for the use of variable rate seeding would be this zone classification. So in the last one, we saw yield variability spatially, so that land classification. We also have yield variability yearly. So what we can do with this is build zones from historical yield. What we've seen is using 3 years of aggregated soybean yield data, we can, you know, with a fairly high certainty, predict the high and low yielding subfield areas. So there on the left-hand side, that's 3 years of yield data from one field. And what we would see on this is kind of in these areas that I boxed off, we can kind of see low yielding areas come up each year, kind of in the center there. You know, it's more pronounced some years. You know, year one, maybe not as much, but year three, we can definitely see where those low yielding areas are. And same way there on the west end of the field, northwest end, you know, there's a little bit of low yielding area. So we can use this to, you know, again, with a fairly high certainty, predict where those low yielding and high yielding areas are going to be year after year. So with that, what we have done here is build an online interactive summary and decision tool. So this is going to be our soybean variable rate planting simulator. And this is actually going to use that aggregated set to build some prescriptions. So to get to this, this is online right now. You can go to it. If you go to our website and go to research and then results, link is down there at the bottom. What you can find is this soybean variable rate planting simulator. You can go into this. There is a how-to video and a manual that you can use to kind of familiar yourself with the tool. I just kind of wanted to run through this then. So as I mentioned, 3 years of data. So what we would need is 3 years of shape files, yield shape files, to be put into a folder, zipped up, and then you can upload that into this tool. One thing I do want to make you aware of is that we are not saving any of this data. It's uploaded from your computer to the website, but then it's deleted afterwards from the website. So as far as saving data, collecting data, we're not doing any of that. But once you upload these 3 years, what it's going to do is aggregate this. You can kind of see the blocking there along the top in those 3 years, and then it's going to build these productivity zones. So in the bottom image is the final kind of overlay that this tool has developed, and we have low yield stable, low yield unstable, high yield unstable, and high yield stable. So what we're seeing there is those that have the stable kind of tag to them. Those are areas that each of those 3 years we're seeing consistently either the low yield or the high yield. Those are not changing year after year. Those unstable, we're seeing some variability year after year, but generally, it's still low or high yielding. So with that plugged in, we can go over along the top are your options to this seeding rate assignment. So we have three options on how you want to define the seeding rate. You can do this using Iowa State data, Midwest data, and this would be the one that I would personally recommend for users to use, would be a user-defined seeding rate, which if you select that one, you can just select what your normal seeding rate is. In this example, it would be 130,000. And then if we go to the seeding rate assignment tab, it's going to use that rate to kind of build off of. And the first thing we would see is this adjusted seeding rate. So for this one, we're only going to be kind of changing the low yield stable areas. And we're going to want to bump up those rates. So on the left-hand side, you see some of the other options that would become available. So again, that low yield stable area is what we're going to be adjusting. The seeding rate change, so we're going to increase that by 10%, which would be 13,000 on top of that 130,000 base rate. And then we would put in what our expected yield increase would be. And again, this is something that you can kind of play around with, make changes to see how different options are going to affect, what that yield map looks like. But for this example, we're going to put an 8% yield increase in. So again, we're only changing that one area. So really those low yield stable areas are the only things that are getting changed. So 143,000 versus 130,000 set for the rest of the field. And then on the bottom there is the expected yield map, just to kind of give you an idea of what that could look like. Then we can jump over to the cost and return analysis, and this is going to be where you start to see some numbers associated with those changes, with those selections. So in this example, our grain price is set at $9, a little low to where we are today, but seed cost $57, and then again the seeding rate change and that expected yield increase are set from where we were last. And what this will ultimately tell us is our expected yield gain in that selected yield category, so that low yield stable area. So that 8% yield increase is going to be roughly 4 bushel per acre, just a little under that. Field 74 acres, and that zone that we are looking at, that low stable zone, is 20 acres worth of that field. And the yield there was 49 bushel. Then the additional seed cost. So with that change, that 10% change that we were adding on to our base rate. So like I mentioned, 130,000 times that 10% is going to give us 143,000 seeds per acre. And with the seed cost of $57 an acre, our seed cost is our extra seed cost is going to be $5.70 an acre. So with that, the potential profit for the selected yield category, so again, low stable, $35.10, that is going to be that ultimate 4 bushel, well, just under 4 bushel an acre for those 20 acres, how much we're going to be getting, minus our additional seed cost of $5.70. So there's going to be a $29.30 per acre return increase in that low stable zone. So total profit on the field would be that $29.30 times the 20 acres that were in that zone. So just approximately $600. So, average that across the entire field, that 74 acres for the entire field, we're looking at, just over $8 an acre profit from adjusting just those 20 acres in our low yielding areas. So again, this is something that, it's all going to depend on what inputs you put in, what you set your grain price, seed cost, your expected yield and seed changes. But this is something you can play around with and kind of get an idea of, if you wanted to make a change in certain areas, what would that look like? What would your potential profits be? And how's that going to impact overall? So kind of in closing here, just wanted to kind of go over some of the points again. So ultimately, our suggestion would be to have a final stand of 100 to 120,000 plants per acre. I mentioned that we were dropping to 80, 90,000 on some of our populations. One thing I caution with that is, if you're going that low, ultimately, if you're planting at those rates, ultimately we're going to have a final stand that's lower than that. And really kind of you're setting yourself up right off the bat, if we run into say drought or, adverse conditions, we're kind of limiting ourselves right off the bat. So our suggestion would be to go higher than that, again, in that 100 to 120,000 plants an acre. Higher seeding rates on the less productive areas, and then lower seeding rates on the higher productive areas. A field with variability is going to have greater variable rate seeding potential. Again, that should not be something new. If we have a lot of variability in the field, we're going to have more options there for the different zones for those high and low yielding areas, which will work out better than if we're wanting to develop a variable rate seeding prescription. Consider testing different rates to determine what works best on your field. This can be through a strip trial. We would gladly help you set that up, run the numbers for you, to kind of determine what's working best for you. Just, give it a try, see what may or may not work. And then again, as I mentioned, the online tool, utilize these resources. We also have, as I mentioned, those 11 years of trial data, 124 trials. All of that information is up on our website. You can look through some of those final reports, see what research may have been done a little closer to you. But that's all out there available to you. Again, I put the URL there at the bottom for you to to get to that information. And then any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or any other member on the RCFI team. We would be glad to chat with you, talk through some of this and help in any way that we can. And with that, thank you for listening to this.